Well, thanks, folks. It's 2 minutes past 12, so we're going to begin this webinar. Welcome to the final in our series of Direct View to Webinar, Direct View to Revenue. This is Hilary Gasha from Insight Venture Partners. We put this webinar series together as a result of requests from the portfolio heads of marketing and marketing leaders to understand what some of the best practices were across the portfolio with respect to the key areas of marketing execution. So the first webinar, which was back in June, was around metrics that every marketer should track. We then moved on to marketing sales collaboration, then to the all-important topic of demand and lead generation and driving leads for sales execution. We then looked at product marketing as a key contributor to both revenue generation, the content, and for help with sales enablement, with sales enablement being our webinar a couple of weeks ago. And our final in the series is the idea of brand and the role of MarCom in achieving the role, in achieving targets. This is something that's often controversial, often neglected. People don't necessarily want to spend too much money on branding because they would rather spend the money on lead generation or sales enablement tools. And so I'm thrilled today to have the folks from Workforce Software who have very recently gone through an entire overhaul of their brand and their messaging. Denise Brody has been super, she's helped to facilitate the last 5 webinars, so thrilled to have her back. She comes to Workforce Software about 1.5 years, 2 years ago from SAP, where she ran the industry cloud. And then we have Merv, who works on Denise's team. Merv Sona also joined from SAP a little over 1 year ago, and she's been the person who's led the rebranding and the efforts to think through messaging. I think you're going to learn a lot from them. Please feel free to type in questions. We'll have a long Q&A session at the back end, and hopefully we're going to cover all the topics that come to mind, but there's certainly things that I'm sure that you'll have that we'll answer at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Denise and Merv to kick off the concept of the impact of communications and branding on revenue.
Great, thank you so much, Hilary. I'm going to move over to my screen really quickly and pre-apologize. I do have a little bit of a cough, so you may hear me pause a little bit in between, but we are super delighted to share some of the best practices around the impact of communications and how that ties into our overhaul of the brand, especially in the last year. So it's been quite an exciting year for us at Workforce Software, right? I think when we came in about 1 year ago, and again, for some of the folks that have just joined, don't forget that the company is 16 years old. So, you know, to be part of the Insight portfolio and looking at the entire turnaround, we came in and we really had to elevate the internal communications. And I think most companies take this very lightly, especially in the smaller companies, because in my previous life of over 80,000 employees, I could see why you would need all of the structure around internal communications. We're 600 strong at Workforce Software, and I think coming in the internal communications is even more broken than at my previous employer. I think that the tie between internal communications and always anchoring everything you do around your core messaging and positioning also changes the overall engagement of your external communications, and that includes everyone, whether it's a customer or partner, you know, AR or PR that we touch. And anytime I mention branding, typically this is, you know, tied with, oh, it's your logo. No, branding is everything that you do. It's like, you know, the blood that flows through your body, and it is everything that is in the DNA of the business. So branding is beyond the logo. And if you decide to do branding like we did, you'll need to really expect that it's going to be heavy lifting. There is a reason why we did not do branding and focus around the branding topic for actually about 9 months. So we took on this endeavor around June, and we just officially launched on October the 1st. So, and as you go through, you know, looking at internal communications, the touch of external communications, the whole branding topic, of course, it's always, for me, you know, I have this philosophy as well, and I tell our team this all the time, which is, if you can't measure it, don't do it. So how do you come in and actually track the effectiveness of everything you do between communications as well as branding? So we'll just share a little bit around our story. So when we're coming in, you know, first piece was really to come and elevate the internal communications. And here you can see some of the workforce goal branding. I was just describing a little bit with the team and Hillary a little bit earlier when I came in and I saw the, everything from the logo to the business card. It was very choppy and it wasn't very smooth and didn't flow with the core messaging and positioning. The employees used to get once a quarter an update for internal communications, and it was the prior CEO standing up and talking to the employees with 80 slides, and sometimes inviting, the various senior leadership team to also do the review. So first thing we did was really focus on how do we change the dynamics around the internal communications and create a more engaged workforce, even within the workforce software employees. So the first thing we did was we came in and we introduced this concept around Minute with Mike, and it goes out every other Friday. The first couple months it went out every week just to get people used to it, and literally I always joke around, it's one of us in marketing standing up there as a chief technician with our iPhone and recording Mike interviewing various people in the business, and Mike is our CEO. So what we do is we will have a theme, whether it's, how is EMEA doing, or if he's visiting Australia, he'll interview 3 or 4 people and we'll queue it up into our overall piece for the videos. So these videos go out every 2 weeks and they take the key areas that we want to launch. So, we introduce also the concept around R3M, which is the rapidly repeatable revenue machine. So that's the 3 and the R and the M. So that way, everyone in the company, it flows through their DNA that revenue is not tied just to the sales folks. In order to generate a rapidly repeatable revenue machine, you actually have to have everybody in place. So the Minute with Mike's really push this key messaging that everybody in our business matters, and they'll review everything from the update of the website to what's going on to the region. Sometimes he actually had a fun one where we interviewed a set of partners who were in and they were receiving training. And he came in, he interviewed all, 6 of the partners going through our academy, and that was another fun one. So again, changing this so that it's not just, once a quarter, every other month, coming in and communicating out to the employees, but these Minute with Mics are frequent and they're watched all the time. And of course, we're monitoring it to see how many people actually go in and view it. So we can also see what themes are popular and which ones we should do more of. We also had, 16 years, there's a lot of legacy, and the surprising part was there was no core values when we came into the company. So as part of this process, we created core values for workforce software, and we did it top down and bottoms up, coming together. So we had the executive team at an offsite. We had a workshop for a couple hours. We came up with some of the core values that mattered to the executive team. And then we put together a panel of about 25 participants all through the business. We took the initial core values, we gave it to a set of millennials internally. We asked them, hey, what do you think of this? What would you tweak? And we came up with the 3 core values that you see here. Then as part of the launch during one of the company meetings, which we have twice every quarter, so the first month of the quarter and the last month of the quarter, and we launched a great video that actually, again, had, about 10 people in the business talking about which core value mattered most to them and why is it important. And then as part of that transition as well is getting all the core values to be displayed at all of our offices around the world. And as we're putting out communications on Mike Marini's behalf internally, we also anchor towards all the core values. So this is just another example of how we've taken the internal communications and elevated it for the employees. And after this past June, so as you can see, Workforce has been busy in the last year. We also had an acquisition of Workplace Systems, a UK-based company. And by the way, this UK-based company has been around for 30 years. So talk about another legacy environment. So in order to improve the communications, every 2 weeks, there is a bi-weekly PMI update. And it's literally 3 or 5 bullets represented from all the different areas of the business on stuff that we think is interesting. So, we have a customer advisory board. We highlight what were some of the key themes. We are, merging offices and merging folks. We, again, highlight the key themes there. And again, what you see here is that the communication is ongoing. And it's a mix, right? It's a mix of everything from videos to emails. And then what we're trying to really do is come in and create that transparency across the entire company. And then, of course, we have a CEO corner where people can write to any time and get an anonymous answer. One of the other things that we're excited to be involved in, sales ops used to run the club process here where they recognized all of the top performers, and it was only sales. We have tweaked that this year where marketing is running it, and once they qualify for club, they get a custom or personalized email from our CEO. And then what we're also doing with the club piece is there'll be a nomination process for each area in the business, because again, with the R3M process, it's not just about sales. It's about everybody in the business participating in order to ensure the success of our goals for ARR for the year. So again, this is really to show you some of the different ways to take, an 80 style PowerPoint that was used to delivering once a quarter, very limited employee communications, to elevating it so that everyone is hearing all of the same key messages within the internal communication side. As part of, the beyond the internal communications, we also looked at how do we change the engagement with the outside world? How do we leverage the analyst relations group to, amplify our message? How do we get out to the press? We also changed what we did with the customer social or the corporate social responsibilities for CSR. We were doing a lot of local Detroit related activities, which I think is great visibility in Detroit, but it doesn't create visibility in the overall global market. So what we've done there is we partnershiped with Gen Youth, and we came in to sponsor 10 scholarships initially for the youth. It kicked off in Livonia. We're about to sponsor a school here in New York. We also have another school that we're going to sponsor also in Detroit. And I just included this because it was fun. You can see the amplification, right? Someone who's in high school that is putting out a tweet also on our behalf. And the cool part was after the scholarship sponsor around the June timeframe, or was May, I think it may have been May, we ended up getting a feature in Sports Illustrated, which is a channel that from a press perspective, we really have not ever been featured in our existence in Sports Illustrated, and it was a fun tie into the CSR piece that we just did. But just coming back to other ways, right? Analyst relations, very, touch and go up until the restructuring. And as part of the whole restructuring, now we do an analyst update every single quarter for the top 10 analysts. Sometimes we may do it around an event like HR Tech or, at our Vision, which is our user group event. But the majority of it is done on the phone, and it's every, large analyst from Gartner, Forrester, down to some of the folks that specialize around workforce management. And it's extremely, I would say, it's an extremely organized process. So there I have to really thank Jen Wolf and our team, because every time there's a briefing, literally every single person that's part of that briefing will get a whole packet, and that packet will flow out. Here are the 10, 15 slides that we're going to go through, and by the way, here's the entire storyboard. There's a lot of legwork that goes around this, and I think that our change in order to nurture the analyst relations side has really had massive amplification for us in the last year. And we see this from, the features that we get. We see this when we don't even pay for play for some of the analysts, and we get some of the top mentions, and we get included into their matrix, or what's comparable to like a Gartner Magic Quadrant. So again, coming in and really focusing on, an AR and PR is tough because the question always is, what do you focus on first? And for us, we really felt that the analyst relations side could be easier measurement and the first piece that we went after. Then we added the CSR component, and then as we move into 2017, we definitely will continue to add the PR aspect of that. So and let's move into the whole brand transition. So you probably saw the old branding on the first page when you saw the core values piece. But if you look at the transition, coming in 2 years ago, this is what was tied around the branding, which was the clocks and the whole piece, which ties very nicely with our workforce management. But again, multiple colors, and the colors don't, you look at a gold, it doesn't show up that well on the digital front. So prior to October 1st this year, we had this top logo piece here, which you can see again, 2 colors. The forest part, most people think, Maribel and I either work at Workday or Salesforce. They never understand that we work at Workforce Software and what we actually do. We also had a trademark issue within Australia when we acquired another company a couple years back. So we acquired Roster Live. They became part of the Workforce Software family, but because our biggest competitor has actually trademarked that name, we're not allowed to use it. So we had to shorten it to WFS. So, it's also quite a bit of legwork for us because all the content build, everything we do as part of Workforce Software has to have a separate branding for the ANZ market. And then we acquired, as mentioned, a company, in June. In the UK, focused on improving our scheduling or forecasting and scheduling solution, and that's Workplace Software. So you can see the logos between all the different brands here. And what we're very excited about is in October, so don't forget, we did the acquisition at the beginning of June, and by October, we are now in full transition around our brand. And what we looked at is, if you look at what does Workforce Software do, I always joke about it that, not really, I kind of use it in my pitch sometimes just to, put smiles on people's faces, but we bring the sexy back into timesheets, right? We're digitizing timesheets, leave management, as well as forecasting and scheduling. And when you look at our brand or just our logo, you have no idea what this workforce with the arrow does. So one of the pieces is to put, the employee at the center and really create a connected workforce. And for us, that is, if you look at all the pieces around, now the consumption of technology, you look at the fact that more employees are moving into the casual workforce. And employees have more power to talk about, hey, we want ease of use. We want to be able to do things quicker. Of course, always the compliance, the employers are key, but they are really focused on improving the overall retention in their company, right? So we serve some of the industries, let's say like a retail that has 78% turnover. And if you get into hospitality, it's even worse. So for us, it's about anchoring the employee and putting an employee at the center of everything we do. And that was the reason why we looked at the overall brand transition. Now, as mentioned, coming in a year ago and looking at what we needed to do to modernize our marketing journey, there was no way to just put the lipstick on a pig and start to do the brand transition, with digital and everything else, because fundamentally what we needed to fix first was our content, right? So we spent the 9 months really gutting, as you probably have heard in the previous webinars, over 100 pieces of content. We have transitioned our website 4 times before we even thought about, the logo and everything else. So, this is a really busy slide, but it gives you an idea. So in order to really think about when is the timing to modernize your brand and to update your brand, I think the question is, do you have the messaging and positioning right for your company? So coming into Workforce Software, if you read the description that went out onto our press releases here, you'll see that everything is around complex policies, compliance, and by the way, it's mentioning products, right? M-Center, Roster Live, and if you don't know Workforce Software, you kind of look at it and you go, do I really care about the products? So our first piece of order was, we came in and we said, because most of our customers think of us as being complex, how do we change that perception? So the first piece was really coming in and looking at creating a tagline, right? We added making work easy. And why is that tagline so important? Because we want our customers to think about our solutions in the cloud as an easy way for adoption, easy use for their employees, and really the future of where they will go, and not this prior complex piece that we had before. So we still kept to the employers because that's what we were hearing from many of our customers is employer-centric. We have this tailored solution that's available, and what we're here to do is really to make work easy. But as we transitioned last year, beyond the logo, as mentioned in the branding, we wanted to modernize the messaging and positioning. And with that, it's all around, again, the connected workforce. It is around the employees. So we actually tweaked also our core messaging and positioning so it reflects all of these pieces. And then you'll notice that, we have moved away from the name for M Center and Roster Live and all those pieces because as part of the branding transition, so you can imagine how busy marketing's been, in the June timeframe, we also started a handshake with the legal team, and we wanted to simplify the product names because we had M Center, Employ, we had Enterprise from the acquisition, and we had names that meant nothing. So what we looked at is how could we tie this so that now we have a workforce suite, and this could help us in everything from search to when we are talking to our customers. And I would say that workforce suite probably comes off much easier, rolling off the tongue, and actually associates with our offering. So again, this just gives you an idea of how we updated the messaging and positioning. Merve will go through some of the details on this, but as mentioned, branding is not one of those things that you decide on, hey, it's Friday, we're going to update our branding, and Monday it's up and running. There were over 30 work streams in order to launch the brand, and we started at the beginning of June, and I would say barely made it for our October 1st launch. There was quite a few people that were involved in the process. The first piece is, one, finding an agency. We were fortunate. We had some existing relationships and already knew their tech from before because we had actually done an RFP with them to look at some videos and animation, and it didn't work out because what we figured out was what they're really good at is digital and coming up with new branding. So we actually did our due diligence with them earlier in the year, kind of tabled them knowing that we would come in to do this brand update. They're based here in New York, so the handshake was very easy. We would come to their offices, they would come to our offices for meetings, and the logo itself for that design, that's what we heavily used them for. One was to take our messaging and positioning, the connected workforce, employees at the center, and tie that into the logo design. So they've worked with us on that as well as the branding guidelines. And then what we also wanted to do was to create some very unique images with them. So beyond using stuff that's on Shutterstock, to really be able to create unique images for workforce software. So we were fortunate to already have that handshake. The other piece that's really important is to make sure to get your legal team involved. For us, it was, we used the executive team for the sponsorship and the rollout, but the legal piece is an absolute handshake. So because we had the naming change, we had to go through the process with the legal team. When we were thinking about the holistic logo design, for example, we actually didn't want to use the word software anymore. We wanted to drop software, only have workforce. But unfortunately, it was too generic. And after about a month search on that and some response, we were not able to, use that piece, and we had to keep the workforce software. We looked at the top 10 competitors. The agency was great because as part of the project, they did a social listening piece with our brand, and they actually came back and they said, surprisingly, even though you guys are a small company, you have a very strong recognition in the market, and you've got an 81% positive brand feedback. So they actually recommended as part of, one, we couldn't drop software, and we were even thinking about a completely different name for the company. But they came back and they said it's actually best that you just keep your existing name, and that way you get the positive feedback also from the outside world. We also had IT involved in the process. I mean, you can see in all these work streams, there's so many different teams and so many different folks. I also joked with the team that we also became, the chief design officer beyond just the marketing piece, because everything we touched around the brand, we were then restructuring the offices to reflect on that. And I would have to say this is one of the pieces we still work on through the Q4 timeframe, along with some of the product changes as well. As part of timeline, as part of the timing, most of our branding update has been for the external facing world. So what I would call the marketing side. And then as we have had to have handshakes with the rest of the areas, whether it's the development organization or with the facilities team or even with the training and services team, all of these pieces will come in place through the Q4 timeframe. And in order to get the employees also excited, we've got a 16-year-old company and a 30-year-old company coming together. There have been some people on the workforce side, they've been, here on average about 6 to 7 years. Some of them have been 10, even some of the original founders. Then you've got the other side from workplace, 30 years of experience. Most of the developers are sitting in Milton Keynes, and by the way, they've been here for about 10 years on average. So we wanted to use one of the company meetings as it was closer to HR Tech, which was where our major launch was, which is one of the big events. We get about 9,000 customers and prospects at HR Tech, so we knew that would be a great launch window for us. And if we missed that launch window, we would miss a good opportunity to get out to the outside world. But as part of the internal company launch, we created this video. So we just happened to, everybody internally was, new Game of Thrones. We had this great video that talked about, instead of, on Game of Thrones, Jon says, winter is coming. And as part of that fun piece, we had workforces coming, and then we showed all the transitions of the brand. I would have to say that has probably been the most well-received internal video that we've had here, just to get everyone excited. And we even have had customers in Australia send us an email through support saying that they love our new brand as part of the launch. So it's been a lot of fun to see the internal employee adoption and just excitement, as well as using HR Tech to update all of our major analysts there and some of our key customers. You'll see that when Merve goes through the HR Tech launch, how surprised we were on how well received the brand was as part of this process. So again, hopefully you can have some idea of the effort on the branding side. And with that, I would love to turn it over to Merve to talk about some of the best practices and what her team has done. So she'll go through some of the pieces. I also did forget to mention that, as mentioned, we kind of had an idea where we wanted to be budget-wise. So we really used Veritech as part of the logo and guideline development and some imagery. Merve's team actually did the heavy lifting, and she can go through some of the resource allocation as part of that. So Merve, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Denise, and hello, everyone. It's great to join the webinar and share our experiences during our brand transition. So, as Denise mentioned, branding transition is really heavy lifting, and most of the time when you just talk with people and when they hear about branding, they usually just think about the logo. But probably, as you understood from the 30+ work streams, it's not just the logo update. It really affects all parts of the businesses. And even the that work streams that you saw in the previous slide, each one of them has their own work streams, which consist of all the different and detailed things to do. So again, as I said, it's just not the logo update, because branding is actually how your prospects, the external world, perceives you. So that's why we were really very working on this branding from not only for the look and feel, but also for the messaging and positioning, to making sure everyone is using the new or like understands the new brand and just use it in the way that we design. So why it is heavy lifting? I think the first step that you take is modernizing the brand. And it actually starts with getting all the feedback from different channels, through social listening, the feedback from your customers, from from the analyst world, etc., and then using that feedback to really build the brand identity. And then when you have all this, the core messaging, which is like employee at the center and connected workforce for us, then you need to apply all those new principles, new branding to the existing content. So we just not only modernize the brand, but also modernize our content, the collateral, the videos, or everything that you see in the fields that the event puts, or like even the company signage. And second piece that why it's heavy lifting is that it also requires really being very consistent across channels. So it's really a, I think a great organization, because you need to make sure that whatever message you use in the social channel should be actually aligned with all your external and internal communications, which includes everything that marketing team creates, but also like anything related to the product documentation, even the RFP database, because you have different channels to communicate with your with the customers, prospects, and with this new branding transition, all channels should be aligned and consistent with each other. And as you can also like understand, this also requires working with internal stakeholders, from product teams to HR to legal to IT to support to services. So those teams may not be the first teams that come to mind when you just talk about branding. But for example, the product team, we really work with them in advance to make sure we add this all branding changes and naming changes in their backlog, so that they can implement it for the next releases of the product. So, and here we, as Denise mentioned, we mostly follow the phase-by-phase approach. So from marketing, from external facing perspective, we just completed everything by October 1st, and then the rest of the integration with other teams is continuing through Q4. So moving forward, I would like to just go over a couple of highlights or like the milestones that we had during our transition. So before starting all the transition, we actually had this brand strategy workshop. So we first started with the in-house research for messaging and positioning. And as we saw, that most of our competitors were mostly focusing on all like employer focused benefits, like being compliant, being efficient, etc. So we then decided to put the employee at the center, because it actually affects the workforce, it's part of the workforce. So this was just a workshop that we did for the messaging piece. And then for the like the overall logo and branding, we also work with our digital agency Vertic here in New York to see where we stand in terms of our logo analysis. And then we just took a couple of our competitors in our space, and then they did a comparison how their logo and our logo performs in terms of the modernization and clearness of the logo. And as you see, we just with this analysis, we saw where we are with our existing logo and where we want to be. And again, probably as you will notice, the logo that is in this first analysis is slightly different than what we have right now, because it of course evolved throughout the time with all the iterations that we have based on the feedback. But overall, our logic was we just still wanted to keep the blue, which was actually the main piece of the previous logo and branding. But in order to differentiate ourselves, we then used the gradient color, as you see in the header, maybe like from blue to green, and just try to use softer colors to make it more modernized. And then for the social listening, it was also very important to decide how to move forward with the company name, with the product name. And as Denise mentioned, we just noticed that we actually have a very positive brand sentiment across social channels. And it was also a great experience to work with legal on these trademark issues, because first of all, we wanted to remove this software word from our logo, because usually software refers to the on-premise world. And since we provide cloud-based solutions, we, for example, just wanted to use the workforce in our logo, but then for trademark issues, we were not able to do that, and then we just kept the software and then just modernized how we look. Then as a next step, after all the different work streams, as again Denise mentioned, we work with Verdict for the logo itself, but then we did all the internal updates in terms of updating the brands, having all the designs for the booths, making sure all the departments from solution consulting to products to sales are aware and updating their own materials as well. And we used HR Tech in Chicago as our launching platform, because it was a great opportunity for us to reach out to the community, the analyst community, the media, as well as our customers. And through our one-to-one and one-to-many demonstrations, we kind of like showed how the product will look like with the new changes. Then we integrated this CSR, customer social responsibility piece to the booth. So, for example, whenever someone visits our booth, instead of giving them some, like notebooks or pens, we just donated $5 each to Gen Youth, etc. So we just wanted to make everything consistent, from like branding to the corporate social responsibility that we are doing. And again, as I said, this event was a great opportunity for us to socialize our new brand with the analysts and getting their feedback. And then we had like all one-to-one sessions with them, talking about our new positioning and messaging, why we did the change, how it really affects what we are doing. And then, of course, we amplified the message through social channels, and this was actually our external touch points. So any customer, prospect, or partner who were not able to attend the HR Tech, then we use social channels to amplify the new branding. And overall, when we look at the performance, we just noticed that even though the attendance was lower compared to previous years, we actually have more marketing qualified leads this year, and I hope it really is because of the new brand. So another milestone, or another main work stream on our end, was publishing the design and brand guideline. So this was actually a great guideline for us to train our internal and external stakeholders and have them apply the branding as we published. So this branding guideline, again, just evolved throughout the process. We just work with internal teams and with Vertic to make sure it covers all the different items that we would like to communicate. And again, this is not just a guide on how to use the logo or the colors. We actually want to make it a more comprehensive tool, which includes like our corporate and brand terminology. For example, like having all this two different companies, there were different terminology that the teams were using. For example, some teams were using systems products instead of solutions, or we were using clients versus customers. So looking at all the different channels we have, we didn't really have the consistency in terms of the brand terminology or the product terminology. So we wanted to make sure, like, from now on, everyone uses the same language and we have one voice across all different communication channels. So that's why we just extended this design and brand guideline to include those type of terminology, consistency rules, when to use which format of the document, etc. And we also injected the company description that you see previously, so that whenever someone wants to have a, like a 100 words of company description, whether to use with a customer or maybe for a press or AR type of things, we want to make sure that everyone uses the same template and same content that we have. So as you see, it really has lots of different work streams, and at the end of the day, the question might be, okay, yes, we are doing all of this, but what's the benefit or what's the effectiveness of all this branding and communications? Well, of course, like with the branding, it might be a little hard to measure the hard ROIs, because it's not just like a campaign or a sales thing that you can measure based on the dollars you gain. So that's why we actually kind of try to look at 3 different areas. So the first piece is that we look at if the branding helps us to differentiate ourselves against our competitors. So how does the new brand positioning help us and increase the awareness in the field, not only in the like the sales cycle, but also from a brand awareness perspective. So I think this differentiation piece should be part of the overall measuring strategy. And the second piece is, of course, we are looking at the reach. So how our new brand helps us to increase our reach to customers. So do we see any increase in terms of the interactions that we get, and any like increase in the website visits, etc. And then the last piece is, of course, engagement. We also want to have the brand help us to increase our engagement with our community. And a couple of KPIs that we are looking throughout this process. The first one is to just measure our reach. We actually just look at our website performance, and the KPIs that you will see here is actually, they are not really very different than your usual website or digital marketing KPIs, but I think those KPIs really helpful to compare where you were with the previous brand and then where you are with the new brand right now. So I think it gives a good comparison. So for example, on our in our case, with the new messaging and positioning and with the new approach on our website, we really observed an increasing average time spent on our website. So previously it was really low. People were just coming to our website but bouncing back very quickly. And now we are gradually increasing that time spent on our website per visitor. And then another piece or another effect that we see is that we really, throughout the year, we really simplified our website. There were a couple of pages on our website which really get lots of clicks, but they were not really providing lots of value to us, because they were more like news from external resources, so they were not totally related to us. So during our transition, for example, we just eliminated those pages, and even though we eliminated that frequently viewed pages with no value, we still right now see an increase in our website visits, and it's probably due to all the social amplification that we do, and hopefully the new branding and the new messaging and positioning that we have on the website is helping to that increase. So another way of measuring the effectiveness is, of course, again through social. Using the social channels, we run some organic and paid campaigns to promote our content and our message. And we regularly measure our impressions, our engagement and interactions. And I think this is also a good way to see how branding helps you, especially if you had the baseline before the branding, then this is a good comparison to see the change between the branding transition. And finally, another way, of course, to measure the effectiveness, again, it's just remember, branding is not just the logo update, so we update our content as well. So we have monthly marketing reports that we create every month, and through that reports we actually track how our marketing collateral performs by, you know, like each one, how each of our assets perform on our website. And then when you just look at all those numbers, we, for example, throughout the year, we created some new types of content on our website. So for example, the shorts, like 2 to 3 minute persona-based product demonstration videos were kind of new for our website, and we just observed that they really get lots of clicks and views from our visitors. So like measuring the content consumption across channels also helps us to understand how the new branding and new messaging and positioning performs across the board. So with that, I would like to again thank you for the time, and I'll just hand over to Denise for the final remarks.
Great, thanks, Merve. So, you know, I think that in summary, and when I look at some of the key takeaways, right, I think that when you're looking at, you know, as we mentioned, there are a few pieces around branding. I think it ties very nicely into internal communications, external communications that support everything around the brand. I would say my biggest advice is to have fun and do a variety of things when it comes to internal communications, right? Not everybody learns and consumes the same way. Some people prefer to read a lengthy email, others may want a detailed PowerPoint, and you know, there is the field organization where they are looking to consume things that are, you know, 2 to 3 minute bite chunks. And for us, we always look at the fun and variety as the, you know, cornerstone around the internal communications. Definitely when you're looking at the external communications and amplification is how do you put the structure in place for AR and PR, especially on the AR front. It's not necessary always to pay for play, but to think about how do you structure the updates, how do you keep everyone, you know, within the inner circle and make them feel like, hey, they get ongoing touches from your organization, but at the same time, you want them to make sure that you get presented appropriately, whether it's in a matrix or a magic quadrant. And I think we treat, you know, our partner ecosystem in a very similar way. So we're creating the brand guidelines, as Merve mentioned. We're sending that out to the partner ecosystem as well. We include the partners in all of our communications. When we did an acquisition, we're also coming in and using the partners. I think on the PR front is always the question is how do you take something like a traditional press release and get more consumption and get more leverage out of it. So one of the things that we've changed in the last year is not to do press releases for partnerships or product announcements. We only do press releases really when it's anchored around a customer or if it's a big reseller. And even in those, we're trying to find customers to support that process. And, you know, it's also thinking about when do you do the transition around the brand. So, you know, we had about, 9 months to really look at the messaging and positioning, which is the cornerstone around the brand. And then from there, that led to the updates around the logo, that led to all the work streams as well as getting everybody internally updated. The day one of the acquisition, I remember when we were doing this in June and we were putting together the FAQ, of course, the first question that's going to get asked is, are we going to change the brand? And we were very transparent. We said, yes, we will be launching the brand as part of the PMI process. So just to make sure that everybody feels like they are part of, the overall feed roll in for anything that they want to hear about. I mean, if you could have gone through the process with us in the 3 months, when we had the person in the middle, initially somebody said, oh, it looks like a frown, that person's frowning. And somebody else said, hey, it looks like a G. So in order to help change some of those feedback, we moved the bar up a little bit more, right? So into the circle. So it's all the little things that you do, but I think that it's important to have the role in. We used our customer advisory board meetings to also launch the brand and get their feedback. So it's not just marketing coming in and doing this in isolation, but getting the whole company behind it, as well as getting a pilot team around the customers, the analysts, as well as the partners. We did use one of the analysts for a half-day workshop to test our messaging and positioning. And initially, we were thinking we would have this theme around the empowered workforce. And this analyst came and said, oh, connected workforce is so much stronger, and here's why. So we came in and we adopted that piece as well. So I think being able to really leverage the external world to bring that branding to life is key in the transition. And as mentioned, it's actually more like 45 work streams, but over 36 work streams as part of the process. We were very fortunate because, as mentioned, we already vetted the agency and we knew what we were going to use them for. And, with pretty much, Marive's, detailed expertise into all of the facets around the branding and her team, we were to go through and look at the details of the work stream. It did take a dedicated graphics person, it took a dedicated web person. And by the way, I didn't even mention this, in order for the brand to come alive and what you see on the website, we also switched out the lead automation in the process in between this. So it's almost like flying a plane and fueling it simultaneously for the 3 months. So we've had a busy, summer, and I think that at the end, it's all measurable. I think that we can show based on our touches around social, our touches around everything that we're doing, that it was worth the transition. And there is no one in the executive team or the company that is going, hey, why did we do the brand transition? Everybody felt like, wow, it is such a great thing for the company and really modernizes us in the market. So with that, let me turn it over to Hillary to see if there's any questions and see if you have any comments. Thank you for your time.
It's fantastic. I think very excited just to hear the backstory around, the decisions you made and the path and the journey that you went on, both by including lots of constituents, but also getting buy-in from customers, analysts, and the management team, the employees. It's just it's wonderful, and I'm sure you're going to have lots of success. So one of the questions that's come through is, how are you measuring brand sentiment? So what tools are you using to measure the brand sentiment?
Yeah, so when we look at the brand sentiments today, we have not truly started to look at that piece. We leveraged the agency to look at some of the brand sentiments for us at the beginning, but I would say that's part of our next piece. Unfortunately, for us, what would have been really great around the brand sentiments would be to tie that into like a survey that you would measure for your NPS scores. But when we came to Workforce about a year ago, they did not have any measurements, or the company did not have any measurements around NPS at all. So we're just rolling that out now as part of the process. But as part of the tie, we will definitely be working with that team to make sure, the product updates and everything gets a slice around the customer perspective. And then I think also for us, the other piece that becomes important is we did the official launch with, the top analyst, but I think we'll wait another quarter and the next update to ask them, hey, have you gotten any feedback as part of the overall piece? And we need to extend the way that we're measuring around the brand sentiments. It's, today we're literally looking at what does the adoption look like? To give you some more insight just on the launch at HR Tech this year, because of how many different events there were during this time period, had half of the attendees, half from last year.
Wow.
What we did was, before we came to HR Tech, we actually set up over 23 demos in our area. We sponsored a couple additional things like seat drops when we were at the event. We used a social channel. We actually, we leveraged our, campaign process also to let people know where we were. We actually put our CSR partner into the booth with us, and we pretty much had this, piece where if people were coming to see demos and they were asking for more details and it was qualified, they could actually drop money in for a scholarship for a couple high schools. So we creatively leveraged HR Tech to update our messaging, but I think the reason why we got so many more MQLs even from last year when it was double the attendance was that we tied it and anchored it into our core messaging and positioning. And we did all the legwork a month beforehand to get people to our booth area.
That's fascinating. The other question that we have is, and this is the last question because we're almost at time, but I would encourage folks to get hold of either Denise or Merv to talk directly with them if you have any questions and you're thinking of undertaking this project yourself. Given that, as you discussed, Denise, there have been lots of people involved and you launched it on the 1st of June and it's been a full 4-month sprint. So it's not something to undertake lightly, but clearly lots of benefits. The final question is, how are the product guys reacting and putting the new branding in the product? So when customers come into login screens, I'm presuming that some of the look and feel is the old look and feel, some of the logos, the old logo. So how do you make the product look and feel consistent with the website and the rest of the collateral?
Yes, here I will have to be honest, even for some of the workforce people that will listen to this replay, they were not excited with marketing changing the branding and the logo at the beginning. There was actually a lot of pushback, especially from that side of the organization. And there were 2 things that really helped us. One, our CEO stepped in and said, guys, we got to modernize our brand. So one, we had the CEO push, which really helped. The other piece as part of the process, as well as we came in and we used them internally to show the stages around the logo and where it was going to go and show the progression. So we included them in the process. And what we agreed to, because our timeline was so aggressive to get to HR Tech in October 1st, we said we would do the marketing launch first, and then we would work with them for all of the product updates. So they will go through the product update in the first, in this quarter. So just letting you know that that's still underway, but now they're full force and everybody's on board. They're now even looking at accessibility and the color. So we've gotten lots of feedback, but there was definitely resistance at the beginning, and it really helps to have the stakeholder community as part of the process.
That makes sense. You've done a fantastic job, and I look forward to seeing the funky product and new product in the future. It's a snowball effect. But I do want to thank both of you. This webinar will be available on Insight's website, and anybody can request it by emailing Alexa Bennett at Insight Partners, so A. Bennett, B-E-N-N-E-T-T, at Insight Partners. Alexa will also be able to send all the other webinars that we've run. And Denise, I'd like to give a big call out to you for being a complete trooper. This is the 6th webinar that you've helped us to do, but the best practices that you've shared with the portfolio I know have been greatly appreciated by the attendees. So thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you for having us. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Merv. Bye.